Hello and welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm Sean Zerla, joined today by former professional fighter Billy Ward to discuss UFC Denver going down on Saturday night. Another card at elevation. So we will discuss some live betting angles, which are always important when these fighters go and fight at a mile high elevation because everybody gasses out a little bit quicker than they tend to at sea level. And it makes live betting extremely interesting. It makes late props, round 2, round 3 props, extremely interesting to look at for a lot of these fights, as we do tend to get later finishes and also more submissions, less knockout power. I feel like the fighters are actually gassing out in the locker room and on the walk to the cage, and they just don't have their full energy to even land knockout punches once they get in there. But submissions tend to increase, and late finishes do tend to increase, especially by submission when we go to elevation. And looking at our main event, Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez. Cortez taking this fight on short notice in place of Macy Barber. That's not a great sign considering she's taking this on short notice going up at elevation and also facing a former champion in Rose. Now, Rose, former strawweight, moved up to 125. Doesn't necessarily look like she has the physique to fill out fully for that division. I don't really think she added a ton of muscle, but she did look better in her second fight in the division as opposed to her first fight. The one thing with Rose and why it's difficult to lay juice on her is she just doesn't cover big price tags typically. She had the fight with Carla Esparza, obviously, where they just stared at each other for 25 minutes and danced around the cage. But Rose isn't proactive all the time, and she tends to let her opponents stay in rounds on volume. When she gets taken down, she tends to stay on her back, and she hasn't shown the best cardio in the past either. But that said, the fact that Cortez has taken this fight on short notice, never been 5 rounds in her career, that sort of neutralizes the cardio angle for me to a degree. So the two ways I'm looking at playing this, the initial way I saw Rose by decision, plus 115, nice cut and dry and easy. You can actually get Rose in the over 2.5 rounds in a same game parlay at minus 125. Would absolutely play that. If it was at, sea level, a little bit less interested in taking the price adjustment and laying juice just because I don't see Rose getting a finish at sea level in the late rounds at a particularly consistent clip. But in Denver, I think it's a much higher probability, especially considering short notice nature. And Cortez never been 5 rounds. So not high on either of these fighters. Typically, both women I typically bet against, but going to take Thug Rose here. And as I said, late iterations, I think Billy is thinking along the same lines. Rose by decision or Rose and late props. And considering the difference between plus 115 for decision and plus or minus 125 for Rose in the over 2.5, I'd rather have the final 2.5 rounds plus Rose at minus 125. So taking Rose and Rose on the scorecards. Billy, I think we have a pretty similar breakdown for this fight and a pretty similar betting approach. I just don't have access to that round 4-5 or decision prop that you seem to be able to get.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I greatly prefer waiting to bet Rose live for a couple of reasons here. I mean, you mentioned she looked better in her second fight at 125. That's because her second fight at 125 was against another strawweight. It was Amanda Hebus, who bounces back and forth between the two divisions. Hebus really should be at 115 all the time. I don't know why she insists on coming up every so often, but that's one of the reasons. And yeah, if it weren't for the short notice, I'd be all over Tracy Cortez here. With that said, Cortez was training for a fight the next week, so it's not like she was totally drawing dead and coming in off the street. It's still a big ask to then go to Denver with 2 extra rounds against a fighter in Rose who trains in Colorado. That's another big factor for me here on the cardio. And yeah, I'm like you. I've looked to bet against Tracy Cortez often in the past, and as anyone can look up her UFC record, she's undefeated in the promotion, so that has not gone well for me. That really is preventing me from wanting to take anything pre-fight on Rose. I think Cortez is, at this point, probably the better fighter, the more powerful fighter, going to be more aggressive, just do more early. And I'm just trying to wait to see if we can get Namajunas at plus money in the second, third, fourth round, assuming that Cortez hits a wall here. I would be more comfortable betting Cortez pre-fight if she had an ounce of finishing ability, but she's never finished a UFC fight, also had a lot of close decisions. If you're coming in on short notice at a fight at elevation, you kind of have to sell out and just try to get the stoppage. We'll talk about that in our fight of the night coming up pretty soon. It's just a fight IQ thing. You don't have 25 minutes in you, most likely. You got to go for it. We've just never seen that from Tracy, which is keeping me off her pre-fight. Otherwise, I might be on that side. But yeah, obviously, we're going to talk about a lot of live betting here. definitely prefer Rose live. If I had to take it pre-fight, it'd be that 4-5 decision. The same game parlay and over 2.5 at a 5-cent price difference is pretty much the same thing. Any of those I like, but I would much rather wait to see if we can get plus money midway through this one.
Good stuff. Yeah, I typically look to live bet against Rose. It's an odd spot where I'm looking to live bet on her, but she trains at elevation. She doesn't have the best cardio, but of the two, she should handle the conditions much better. Our fight of the night, as you just teased, Drew Dober against Jan Silva. Silva coming back after a knockout against Charles Jourdain, where we discussed that fight at length and decided in a vacuum we're going to take every Brazilian that we can at a coin flip price against any Canadian that we can. One of my favorite tweets from that card, Naked Gambler on Twitter, Irish MMA fan. I'm not familiar with Gene Silva, but before he had even thrown a single punch, he was moving in this deliberate, confident way that told me, oh, this guy is used to knocking people dead when he hits them. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it's the same way that Figgy and Yoel move, meaning Davison Figueiredo and Yoel Romero. And then 3 minutes later, right after the knockout, because he tweeted that between rounds, yeah, that was the move of a man who truly, unequivocally believes that if he hits you, you're fucked. You can't fake that. Gene Silva is immediately one of my favorite fighters. I mean, he's like high-fiving opponents for throwing cool strikes against him. He's like hugging them between rounds. I don't know if there's like something off with him or if he's like the best at playing mind games I've ever seen by being nice, killing people, literally like killing opponents with kindness. And then he turns the switch on and he's right in Jourdain's face. And Jourdain's like, wait, man, you were high-fiving me a minute ago. What's going on? I really like Silva. I think he's super fun to watch. He's crazy aggressive. I think the one thing people are overlooking here, because it's fight of the night or the expected fight of the night, we expect these two to just swing it out. Drew Dober, I think, can top time him if he wants to. If he fights like intelligently, I don't think Silva has great takedown defense. And we've seen Dober proactively wrestle in the past. He doesn't do it often, but when he wants to do it, he can do it. And he can get takedowns and spend time on top of people. He's terrible when people try to top time him. And maybe there's a chance Silva could do it back to him. I mean, we've discussed Silva and the Fighting Nerds and the fact that these guys are well trained and come in with good game plans. But I think Silva is very much more of a striker, and I don't know if his fight IQ is on the same level as his other teammates. But in terms of the technical breakdown of this fight, or how I see it playing out early, if they do slug it out, I think Silva just has better hardware. He's smaller, technically. He's coming up division to face Dober on short notice. That Dober chin, though, is starting to go a little bit. And Dober's style, he absorbs strikes at like 49%. He takes one to give one. And that's great when you have elite durability, but that durability started to go. Terrence McKinney knocked him down. Dober got back up, finished him. But then Dober got KO'd by Frevola. And his last fight, I think it was against Avoyev, he kept getting taken down, popping up. He was winning the striking, but no like real finishing threat against him in that fight. I think Silva is going to hit the chin in round one. Silva by KO. Silva round one props, I think, are interesting. And then Dober's the guy who trains at elevation, and he is the guy more suited to this weight class. I still think Silva, moneyline minus 110, good pre-fight, and then probably live bet into Dober after round one to hedge off a little bit. But Silva finish props, his KO1, I think those are all iterations worth playing him into a live bet on Dober. 36-year-old Dober does have probably has better cardio given where he trains and the fact that, Silva's now fighting twice in 3 weeks. But it's Silva pre-fight as the side for me for sure. And I think you kind of agree on the Silva violence into Dober live bet.
Yeah, I mean, I teased it before. I think he's smart enough, or this team is well trained enough to understand, hey, we're here for a good time, not a long time. You got to sell out and try to get this knockout. I think we never know what these conversations are like backstage, but if I'm in his corner, it's like, hey, we don't want to be doing this for 15 minutes against a bigger guy who trains at elevation. It's kind of tricky with these quick turnaround fights. Some guys, if they're super disciplined, they'll look better the next time around because they were already in shape. They stayed in the gym. If they didn't take a lot of damage. Some guys, they go out and, enjoy their knockout of the night bonus real heavily in Vegas or wherever they're at and don't look as great on the short turnaround. That one we don't really know. But yeah, I'm not worried about him coming up in weight class. Like every time he lands a shot on anyone, it just looks rough. And my favorite line about that, and I'm borrowing this from Rampage Jackson, but when he hits people, they stay hit. They don't come back. They don't get back in the pocket asking for more. Every time I've seen him land a strike, his opponent is like, whoa, let's not do that again. I need to come up with another plan. Part of my analysis on Silva by knockout is I think Drew Dober kind of understands the assignment at this point in his career, where he's not a guy who's there because he wins them all. He's a guy who's there because he makes really fun fights. And I kind of expect him to trade with Gene Silva. He shouldn't. You're 100% right. He just seems like the kind of guy that he's going to dance when he hears some music. So that helps with that. You can get Silva in round 1 or 2, the split round prop. It's similar price to the knockout. I think it's a little bit worse. I prefer knockout just because we haven't seen him submit anyone. Harder to submit a bigger, stronger guy than it is to knock out a somewhat chinny, willing opponent. And yeah, coming back on Drew Dober live, I put live after round 1 in the sheet. This one, you kind of have to play it by ear. I think we have to see how hard Silva's throwing, see what kind of game plan Dober has. Just be flexible on this one. It's not like round 1 ends, I'm just going to blindly click and take that live bet. I kind of want to see how both guys are doing. I absolutely hate betting in the middle of rounds live because of the tape delay that we're going through. This is one where I might make that exception if it looks like Silva comes out real hard at the start of round 2, kind of dumps the tank, doesn't get it. That might be the ideal spot for Dober, especially if he lands some of those shots. But then Dober gets the takedown, or Dober shoves him up against the fence, being the bigger, stronger guy, as you alluded to.
Yeah, it might not be right after round 1. In fact, the way Silva approached the Jourdain fight, he kind of stalked him and didn't throw anything for like the first 3 minutes. And then towards the end of round 1, he started picking up the pace. Clearly had him hurt at the end of round 1 and then finished him early in round 2. So he seemed to build to actually like starting to fight at the end of round 1. And if he does the same against Dober, yeah, you want to wait till middle of round 2 maybe to fire a live bet, because he might be starting to pour it on end of round 1, early round 2. And that might be the window where Dober needs to survive. It might not be from the opening bell. It might be between rounds, getting back off the stool and, seeing if he's still wobbled or what have you. Yeah, so really fun fight. Should be fight of the night on paper. Would love to see these two slug it out, and definitely keep an eye on Silva's body language from a live betting perspective. Dober just having the elevation advantage, but Silva not cutting weight, I think, sort of neutralizes that to a degree. Favorite underdog on the card? I'm going to go with the co-main event, Muslim Salikhov, the king of Kung Fu, against Santiago Ponzinibbio. Old man fight, 37 and 40 respectively. Neither guy has particularly good cardio. Salikhov, to me, though, just the better mover. He's going to be the one, dancing around the cage, utilizing footwork, utilizing kicks. Ponzinibbio doesn't really throw kicks. He likes to box, and he just likes to stand in the center of the cage. He doesn't really utilize good footwork anymore. He just likes to be in a phone booth, boxing in the pocket. He'll accept leg kicks and then punch you back in the face. But Salikhov, I think, is just going to take advantage of the larger octagon here. He's seemingly struggled when he's been put in the apex. He's struggled against bigger power punchers, guys who can knock you out with one punch. That's not Ponzinibbio, so much. Ponzinibbio is more of an attritional finisher for me at this stage of his career. Earlier in his career, yes, absolutely. I think he had more one-punch power, but now at 37, I think he's more of an attritional finisher. He's also, I believe, the guy coming off of a knockout loss. Isn't that correct? I guess they both are.
They both are, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just an old man fight. Normally Salikhov, I have concerns about his cardio when he's facing younger opponents. It's really not the case here. Maybe Ponzinibbio live, but not like a major cardio discrepancy where I'm like, oh, you have to hedge out live after round 1. So yeah, just straight up Salikhov plus 155, no prop, no live angle, just taking the underdog in what could be a very sloppy co-main event down the stretch. Billy, any thoughts on the co-main and any underdogs that caught your eye?
Yeah, I'm mostly with you. I think if I was, and I should phrase that differently, I think I actually like Salikhov live as well. My only thought here is he's got some of those Sanda Wushu takedowns where he kind of just trips you over, gets a little inside action. Those don't use the same kind of energy that, Cody Brundage is going to use exploding for a big double leg takedown. If he can land 1 or 2 of those on Ponzinibbio, it's going to shift that cardio balance pretty heavily, just making Ponzinibbio get up, making these, as you said, old men have to work their way back to their feet. Whoever has to work from the bottom there, I feel like they've got one of those in them for this fight. And then I'm also betting under 2.5 rounds at minus 120. Again, it's 78 years of combined age, both coming out off knockout losses. One of the heavier weight class fights we're seeing on the card. It feels like everything's kind of pointing in the same direction there. But as far as underdogs, I've gone back and forth on a couple. I like Damon Blackshear here against Montel Jackson. Jackson is very heavily dependent on being explosive and knocking you out early. It's a 135-pound fight, so cardio might not be the big issue here. But he gets taken down a lot. Blackshear loves to grapple. He's the one like super tall, skinny guy that relies very heavily on his grappling, which is interesting. He hit that twister finish a couple fights ago. It's easy to write that off as a fluke. He's looked for that in every single one of his UFC fights. At some point, he has gotten mostly behind a guy and tried to set up a twister.
Race to Ruya does that
grappling.
too. I don't know if you noticed that. Race to Ruya is going for the twister every time he gets the back. It's just like his preferred submission.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense given their builds and the way they can attack, because you don't need to fight for that second hook. If you just have the one, just stretch it out, see if it's there. You're going to make 50 grand if you land it, almost guaranteed. And so, like, at least give it a shot. It doesn't hurt anything. Sure. But, yeah, I like the grappling upside here from Blackshear. It's going to be a sweaty 2-3 minutes because Montel Jackson has big power. But one stat I noticed when I was looking into this fight, anytime Jackson has been taken down more than once in a fight, he's lost. And Blackshear is averaging about 2.5 per 15 minutes. And obviously, you'd expect Blackshear to go for more in this kind of matchup than he did against guys where he might have a striking edge. So just a guy who's vulnerable against grapplers, fighting what I would say still up-and-coming, very high-level grappler, and we're getting plus money on the grappler side. I would prefer this fight not to be at elevation to make those bets, but it's still plus 124, so I'll still take it.
Yeah, maybe even I didn't consider it initially, but a Jackson live bet if Blackshear is having trouble getting those takedowns, or if he's getting them, but it looks like he's gassing a little bit, because I have concerns about Blackshear's cardio at elevation in a 15-minute fight, and if Jackson is defending the wrestling, I might look to live bet him after round one if you get a better price, depending on that's
I have concerns. Oh no, I could see a live betting angle on both guys, right? Because if Jackson is swinging real hard and doesn't get the knockdown, it's probably Blackshear. If Blackshear shoots 3 or 4 takedowns and only gets one of them or doesn't get either of them, that's also a concern. To be fair to Blackshear, like, he tired out a little bit in his fight against Mario Bautista that he took on 1 week notice after twistering a guy and getting a 50 grand bonus the week before. So the only time we've seen him really struggle cardio wise, there was at least an excuse built in there that's somewhat logical. So I don't know. I could see cardio issues coming from both guys depending on their game plan and how it works for them. So don't go in there like, I'm going to blindly live bet fighter X after round one. You got to watch this one.
Yeah, there was this Zalal fight too. He got 10-8 in the third round. He looked pretty bad there. I don't know. I'm so, like, the one thing that gives me caution about, I'm pretty, like, I get your point. I'm definitely leaning more towards live betting Jackson. The thing that concerns me with Jackson is he's huge. Like, he probably cuts a ton of weight to make the division. He's huge hands too. And that's like the concern for Blackshear is, like, it seems like when guys put their hands around Jackson, his grip strength is insane, and he just, like, peels your hands off of you, off of him. I don't know. I don't know how effective Blackshear's grappling is going to be against the guy with that grip strength. You really don't know until you see it play out. He was fighting JP Buys, who was a flyweight, and he kept knocking JP Buys down every time he jabbed him. But anytime Buys put his hands around Jackson, he was taking him down. So he's definitely been taken down by smaller guys who are less strong. But at the same time, like, once he gets taken down, he seems to be able to break the grip strength pretty easily. Yeah, it's an interesting fight for sure. I'm probably leaning towards live betting Jackson, but as you said, like, if he goes for a finish in round one, gasses, or doesn't get it, and Blackshear is still there, yeah, you can certainly consider the other side. Very interesting fight. Maybe an under. Maybe an under in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, both guys have stoppage upside. I was just say real quick though, on the majority draw against Zalal, Blackshear took that one on like a week notice. Zalal was supposed to fight somebody else, and it was Blackshear's UFC debut. Like I said, there's been moments of concern, but you can kind of see how it would have happened, and he's looked better under normal circumstances. I don't know what that adds up to, but it's not me having major concern. But yeah, under or inside the distance or that kind of stuff makes a ton of sense here. It's pretty binary how either guy is going to get it done. You think one of them's going to happen, probably, but
yeah, it seems pretty binary. Getting plus money at elevation between two guys who are fairly aggressive. I might be going under for the division. Blackshear and Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jackson being big for the division. Blackshear's like the 5th tallest bantamweight or something, and he's the shorter guy in this fight. I made that up. That was a stat from like 2 fights ago for Blackshear. It's probably changed, but they're both very, very big for 135.
Yeah, interesting fight. Probably the second best fight on the card for me. in terms of like action and excitement. Let's move to our top props. So Billy had already mentioned one prop, the Salikhov, or I guess it's an under, it's a total. The Salikhov and Ponzinibbio under. Billy, what other props are you taking a look at for this card?
Yeah, I like the Josh Van Charles Johnson fight, which I would argue is probably my second favorite fight on the card, just because we've got 22-year-old Josh Van looking better and better every fight. Picked up his first UFC knockout last time against Charles Johnson, who has fought 9 times in the last 2 years. Not a great record in his pro career or UFC career. He's 15-6 as a pro, 4-4 in the UFC. Never been finished. He was like a D1 distance runner. Was never in the Olympics, but he has the Olympic tattoo. I don't understand how you do that. I thought that wasn't allowed, but, you know, he makes some weird personal style choices in general, if anyone's seen his haircut. So we'll let that one go. I like Josh Van by knockout at plus 400 here. You know, we talk about it with older fighters. We say the power is the last thing to go. It's also the last thing to show up. I mean, I'm sure most of our listeners here on the other side of 22, like we are, you know, you get that man strength into your early and mid 20s. You fill out your body a little bit more. And Josh Van's a guy who lands over 9 significant strikes per minute. You put a little extra power beyond that, I think he can be the first guy to finish Charles Johnson. Obviously, KO is more likely here, but he's got a couple submission wins on the regionals. It wouldn't surprise me to see a club and sub. And I hate getting greedy and chasing plus 500 instead of plus 400 and then losing the bet because the other thing happened. So I like Van inside the distance at plus 400. It's another one. Sean, you're on the other side of this live, but I think if Charles Johnson survives the first round and a half, he's a good live bet. His last 2 wins, he lost the first round and then won the second and third. That's Charles Johnson's game plan. It's what he's trying to do. He gives away the first round. He's going to put a pace on you late. Van is a much better fighter than the guys he's fought before, which is why I see where you're coming from. I am not for sure coming back on Charles Johnson, but there's some scenarios where if Van sells out hard, then I'm going to come back in on Johnson live.
Yeah, so the guys Johnson beat, Isaac Maxim, Jake Hadley, they were trying to wrestle him and they gassed out. You know, these are guys who Johnson probably had the striking advantage against had they just fought a striking match for 15 minutes. If he fights a striking match for 15 minutes against Josh Van, I think he gets torn up. I think Johnson actually needs to maybe grapple to win this fight. Van has shown a little bit of susceptible takedown defense. You can control him for a little bit on the ground. And I think Johnson should be the one mixing it up a little bit here because, yeah, I think his comeback wins have been a result of opponents trying to grapple him, tiring out, and then going away a little bit where Johnson had the striking edge. I don't see that happening in this fight. I think Van's cardio is equal, if not better. I think they both build in rounds 2 and round 3. It's almost like stylistically, it's a bit of a mirror fight because they both tend to take round 1 off, you know, resist the opponent, make sure they're still around, and then they build the longer the fight goes. So it was a lean for me in terms of Van as a live play just because of Johnson's recent opponents and how he won those fights. You know, and expecting that maybe the live market is going to give him a little bit too much respect after round 1. But I prefer Van as the side. I like your look on the KO prop. You know, I think almost everybody betting this would probably be betting Van by decision if they're playing a prop, just because Johnson's so durable. This one seems likely to go to a decision. But yeah, fun fight between Charles Johnson and Josh Van. I have a bunch of round props.
Everyone's durable until they're not. That's
true.
People always say, like, everyone thought, you know, Drew Dober's not going to get knocked out, us included. We had a bad call against Matt Favola, but everyone's chin's great until it isn't. And a 22, 23-year-old kid with increasing power who's going to hit you 9 times per minute might be when you find out it's not there anymore. So
and hit you a lot in the body.
Again, plus 400. I'm not.
Hit you a lot in the body at elevation too. That's the key. He's going to work like Van really mixes it up well. His offensive striking is really dynamic. I mean, he's already one of the better offensive strikers at flyweight. So that's kind of why I think Johnson might need some grappling success to break up the pressure to win the fight. Some round props I'm targeting. Christian Rodriguez round 1 at plus 440. Julian Erosa tends to get knocked out like in one of the first exchanges, or he goes the full 15 minutes. I think he's been knocked out in round 3 once, but other than that, like he gets clipped early, he wobbles, you either finish him or the fight keeps going. And if this fight extends, I think Erosa is going to be a problem for C-Rod just because similar to just what I said with Johnson, C-Rod has just sort of been resisting grapplers, letting them tire out, and then taking over in rounds 2 and rounds 3. Now, I think he's actually a very dynamic striker. We haven't seen him be able to get the type of matchups to prove how dynamic he is on the feet. And when he's not facing a wrestler and he can open up a little bit more with the striking, I think you're really going to see it, shine. That said, Rosa can grapple. He's just not the best wrestler. So I don't see him getting C-Rod to the ground like Bulgarian did, or even like Cameron Saman did, or was it Cameron Saman that he fought? I know he fought Rosas Jr. I don't know. I don't remember.
C-Rod took Saman down 3 times. C-Rod
right.
used the wrestling in that one.
Yeah,
Josh
it was
Williams
the
took him
Rosas
down
fight. He
twice.
resisted in round 1.
JSP took him down, but that was like super short notice, and JSP takes everyone down. Like, that's one of those that you go, that one doesn't count. But
Rosa probably is the best submission grappling of all those guys, but the worst wrestling among that group too. So if the fight hits the ground, Rosa dangerous, but C-Rod is so not only durable but good at surviving submission attempts, good at just staying safe, eventually getting fights back to the feet. Now, Rosa's not going to tire out, so from a live betting perspective, I don't really love C-Rod either. I think where C-Rod has been the one coming on late against guys who tried to wrestle him, didn't have success, or did have success but eventually tired out. If Rosa survives the early round, he's just in your face, and he's going to make this close and competitive, I do think. C-Rod absolute hardware advantage. He may clip him in rounds 2 or rounds 3, but yeah, if this gets out of round 1, I think it's close and competitive. I think it may go the distance. So C-Rod round 1 plus 440, and then after that, just watch and enjoy. 3 different fights, round 2, round 3 props. Angelusa, round 2, round 3, plus 2,400 and plus 2,600 respectively. His opponent, the Bonfim brothers, neither of them have good cardio. This one particularly tired out last time in Brazil, in his home country, and now he's going up to elevation. Lusa's a bit of a quitter. I don't really like either of these fighters, but Bonfim, given the cardio concerns he showed at sea level, I have major concerns about him fighting at elevation. So Lusa, live bet after round 1, and then his round 2, round 3 props. Cody Brundage, bet his over 1.5 against Bo Nickel. That was a great bet, but Cody Brundage, I think, is very likely to get finished here by Abdul Razak Al Hassan. The big difference in what concerns me is the age. Al Hassan is much older, much likelier to be falling off of a cliff. I just don't think Brundage is a good fighter. He's got into the UFC because his opponent broke his arm in Contender Series. He won via slam KO in the UFC. This guy in Billy's luck ratings is the quintessential, this guy keeps getting by. And I guess this is supposed to be the favor fight that he gets for taking the Bo Nickel fight too. Brutal. It's the
easiest fight they're gonna give him at middleweight, right?
I guess it is. But yeah, Al Hassan, just much better hardware. I think he's actually improved too. He went out to Colorado 3 fights back, and even though he's in his late 30s, he's showing improved cardio, actually sustaining it into the 2nd and 3rd round of his fight. So I think Al Hassan actually has a clear cardio advantage here. Again, assuming the age differential is not going to cause him to fall off of a cliff, which is why I'm not betting his money line at minus 170. But yeah, round 2, plus 600, round 3 for Al Hassan at plus 1,200. Big cardio advantage over Cody Brundage. Josh Fremd, the final, plus 700 and plus 1,000 respectively against Andre Petroski. Fremd now trains in Colorado. He used to train, I believe, in Pennsylvania, like Petroski does.
Pittsburgh.
But yeah, he's now training at Factory X Muay Thai in Colorado. He should have the better gas tank here. Petroski should be the better athlete, the stronger athlete in round 1. I think he can absolutely choke Fremd out. But after round 1, Petroski's effectiveness falls off of a cliff. I know he has that pair of round 3 finishes on his record. He looked like he was gassing in those fights badly. His opponents were just gassing worse. I think Fremd is going to have a big cardio advantage down the stretch of this fight. So Fremd live, and then rounds 2 and rounds 3 start to go against your live bet, Billy, which I'll go ahead and tease out that we're going to jump to in a moment. But yeah, I think this is a good card for live betting. I think this is a card for late round props. And just, my best bet on this card, I'm just going to get to it, is to live bet this card. Just be around at 7 p.m. to start live betting this card. Because there's at least 6 fights, maybe 7 fights out of the 12 that I think are good for live betting purposes. As I mentioned, Abdul Razak Al Hassan, Drew Dober, Josh Fremd, Angelosa. Want to look at the prelim fight between Maria Gapova and Luana Santos as well. Santos a minus 400 favorite. Gapova lost as a minus 1,500 favorite against Shanna Dobson. I think she's one of the biggest favorites in UFC history to lose. That was one of the first cards at the Apex, I believe, too, when we were in the midst of the pandemic. So a lot of people saw that upset happen. But yeah, Santos should submit her probably, and would imagine if Agapova is any success in round 1, you actually may get a decent price on Santos to come back live. And then finally, as I mentioned, Josh Van potentially in that fight, and also the Blackshear and Johnson fight. So lots of live betting angles on this card through UFC Denver, fighting up at elevation. Don't have heavyweights or light heavyweights, but a couple middleweight fights. And then a bunch of cardio dynamics that I think lend itself to good live betting spots, or at least good late prop spots. Billy, why don't we finish off having a little discussion about this Andre Petroski Josh Fremd fight? Absolutely agree with you. Andre Petroski, the pre-fight side, but why do you think he has a better chance of actually winning the fight than I do?
Yeah, it's a almost tailor-made matchup for Petroski against a tall, skinny guy in Josh Fremd who can't grapple. Petroski is one of the better pure grapplers, arguably in the UFC, certainly in the middleweight division. He does pro grappling events like 2 or 3, like, at least 1 or 2 between all of his fights. He's really out here pushing that hard. Also a bigger, stronger, more explosive guy. With that said, I'm totally with you on the live bet on the other side. Also part of it, I got Petroski at plus money earlier in the week. That was in my luck ratings. I'm sorry, I'm kind of shotgunning here, but last point on that, Petroski was 5-0 in the UFC. He took a super short notice fight against Michel Pereira and lost. Pereira's on a tear at 185. There's no shame in that. And then he was winning the fight against Jacob Malkoun before he shot a really hard double leg, banged his head on Malkoun's hip, and knocked himself out. That's one of those where, on the one hand, it's very concerning that that happened, but it's probably more of a fluke than it is like his chin's so bad he knocked himself out. No, it was just a weird angle. He got a stinger. Weird stuff happened. Like, that's my read on that one. I am with you on the live side that the only live spot I'm going to push back on is the Judo Thunder versus Cody Brundage. Al Hassan is 0-6 in fights that have gone past 5.5 minutes in his career. He has never won a fight that made it more than 30 seconds into the second round. Brundage, not a great cardio guy either. Trains in Denver, can wrestle a little bit. I'm not saying I'm betting Cody live. I'm saying that's another one where I think you watch a little bit more. If Cody fails 3-4 takedowns, 100% with you on Al Hassan. If Cody's being a little bit more patient in the first round, I think that makes him the side. So, yeah, those are the two where I, in some ways, disagree with you. Not that I'm pushing back too hard on either. But, yeah, I think it's Petroski pre-fight, Fremd live in the Battle of Pennsylvania. And then I think Cody's a little bit underrated as a live choice, depending on how the first round goes.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, Brundage is a five-round win from earlier in his career on the regional scene. Like, he's won decisions. He's been 5 rounds. I see significant improvements from Al Hassan since he's moved to Colorado, and I just don't think Brundage is UFC level. I respect anybody who makes this level. I am certainly not UFC caliber. And I don't mean it as an insult. I just feel like he's a cut below these other fighters, and I feel like if you put him up against a lot of the guys that Al Hassan has faced, I think he meets a similar, if not worse, fate. It's just kind of comparing class against class. Al Hassan was like putting it on Hakeem Buckley in round 3. That was, yes, I know he lost the fight. He looked really good in the 3rd round of that fight. It was like shocking to see the improved cardio. And I think that was the first fight when he had moved to Colorado. Then he beat Claudio Ribeiro, KO'd him, got KO'd, or not KO'd by Joe Pyfer, but I think knocked down and then submitted by Joe Pyfer. So Brundage would die immediately against Joe Pyfer, probably, right? Like, would Brundage make it 7 minutes with Joe Pyfer? I'm not saying like, this is like the 1-for-1 like transitive property thing, but like I think Brundage dies on the first exchange against Joe Pyfer, and that's just me comparing the hardware against hardware. I think Al Hassan is just like better athlete, bigger, stronger, probably slightly more durable. But yeah, Brundage, like top time wrestling, cardio, it might be there. I just think Al Hassan has improved a little bit. So I really don't want to spend this much time talking about a 38-year-old fighter who, if he loses, he's probably going to get cut. But, I think it's worth just considering, just before we sign off, like, a lot of times I have very formed opinions of what these guys are in my head. Alonzo Metafield, Abdul Razak, Al Hassan, like, bet them in round 1, live bet against them after round 1. That's like almost always the way I've always approached their fights. I think it's interesting to watch a guy develop late in his career. You don't expect it. You don't expect like guys to improve or change their style or improve their cardio late in their career. So just keep an open mind, watch that recent tape, and look for improvements, because not only did he improve the cardio in my mind, but there's a reason why it improved. He went to Colorado and he started training with new camp at elevation. So particularly Team Elevation in Colorado.
And he
but,
went up to 185 in that span too, which probably helped part of it, because he was fighting welterweight before that. Not only was he fighting welterweight, he was badly missing weight at welterweight before that. So like that kind of heavy cut, it does make sense. And I'm with you on Brundage not truly being UFC level, but until like the last few years, we would have not thought Abdul Razak Al Hassan was UFC level. I'm not saying because he's gotten better. I'm saying because what we think of as UFC level has came down a little bit. It's a sloppy middleweight fight between two not great guys. Kind of happy to take plus money pre-fight on either one, I think, but live, I'm not convinced one way or the other live. I think you need to watch it and see, is Al Hassan selling out for a knockout? Is Cody Brundage messing up a bunch of takedowns? That's going to be what determines it for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, first round dynamics, very similar, to the Jackson Blackshear fight. Like, watch the first round dynamics. I think there's an argument. You can go either way with a live bet. But I do have a side that I think is likelier to be the side that I will be live betting. And that'll do it for us for the UFC betting preview on the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Thank you for tuning in. You can find more UFC betting content on actionnetwork.com. Billy's luck ratings. I'll have a main event preview. We'll have all of our staff best bets and other fight previews as well. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets for this weekend uploaded in there eventually. And best of luck with those bets this weekend. We'll see you next time on the Action Network podcast.